Alright, hello everyone. My name is Fray once again, and threw in the face cam for this episode. We were talking about minions that cost 2 or less mana. Last video, which is the first episode of the series, we talked about evaluating minions that cost 3 or more in the terms of Arena. We're going to do that again today. Hopefully I created an entire video series for Arena, and I hope that by watching these videos you can understand a little bit more of basic game theory when it comes to picking cards. There's already been a good amount of YouTube content about how to play out the cards once you have them, but I think it's important to also talk about picking the right cards and understanding why each card is the right card. And yes, there are websites to do that, but I think that it's more rewarding to not necessarily need a website, to just do it on your own, use your own judgment, go on what feels right for you, what ends up working for you, and you can understand by personal experience and just by some pure mathematics. Also, the presentation is in front of me on a monitor that's this way, so if I'm looking at that and not the screen where the webcam is, hello, I apologize. Hopefully it won't be too distracting. Alright, let's get started. As I said before, we do have a part 1, and we're going to use those concepts that we talked about in part 1 here as well. So if you haven't watched that part, it goes pretty in depth, so I think you should, I highly suggest at least, that you go and click the annotation on your screen and go watch part 1 about evaluating minions. Last time, for those of you who already did watch it, we talked about the ×2+1 rule, which is where you multiply the mana cost of the minion by 2 and add 1, and those are ideal stats. So we talked about the Chillwind Yeti, how it has 9 stats because it's 4 mana, and that's ideal. And then we talked about the distribution of those stats and how a Chillwind Yeti is stronger than a Lost Tall Strider because the 4/5 is better than the 5/4 in terms of distribution. And then we also talked about battle cry value, things like Divine Shield and Bomb Lobber, which is deal 4 damage to a random enemy minion, and those kind of things that are crucial to understanding the concepts of minion play in Arena. So, why do minions that cost 2 or less deserve their own video? And the real reason is the ×2+1 rule isn't enough in terms of stats. If you think about a Bloodfin Raptor, which is the 3/2 beast minion, when you take the ×2+1 rule, in theory that's ideal stats. That's the amount of stats that you need. But it is really not what we're looking for in terms of Arena value. It's too weak. It's like an average to subpar kind of card, and we obviously don't want to go off of that kind of pick. So that's reason number 1. We may look at a kind of a ×2+2 rule. We'll look into it later. Also, cards need to justify their card slot if they're useless. If they're cards that are weak or just don't do enough to justify the card itself, sometimes you go in with a massive disadvantage because if you're playing a card that isn't necessarily worth a card, you have a deck of 29 cards and your opponent has a deck of 30 cards. And sometimes that's not the case. And sometimes your opponent will have a deck of 27 cards and you'll have a deck of 28 cards, or something like that, of like considerably lower or below average cards. And so you want to make sure that these cards that you have are going to make a difference in your early game and not just get swept away under all the other cards that your opponent has. And then we're also going to talk about new distribution rules. In the other video I talked about how generally health is better than attack. In a general sense, we're going to look about this right now. So 1 of anything, and this is very common when we're looking at 0, 1, and 2 cost minions, 1 of anything, attack or health, is pretty bad, or usually bad. Let's take an example, and though it's not a 2 or less cost minion, I put the Mogushin Warden on the screen because it's very comparable to the Senjin Shieldmaster, which has the same amount of stats. It's a 3/5 with taunt for 4 mana, versus the Mogushin Warden, which is a 1/7 with taunt for 4 mana. They both have 8 worth of stats, so they're a little bit below average. But the Mogushin Warden is considered a bottom tier pick because it just doesn't do enough. It doesn't justify a card slot, because the 1 attack is just easily survivable by most minions, and they can get multiple attacks into your Warden without him actually being able to make a solid presence on the board state. And so 1 health, I also said Arena is a very hero power dominant kind of place, so it can easily get hit up by the Rogue Dagger, get hit up by the Mage Fire Blast, it can get hit by a Paladin, Silverhand Recruit. Those things generate card advantage for your opponent because they don't have to use their own cards to kill your cards. If they can kill them by themselves, they technically have like a one card advantage on the state of the board. And this isn't always necessarily the case, because if they have to spend their turn using their hero ability instead of playing their own creature, then in a sense you gain tempo, or you're able to shut down their board for a turn and don't let them develop anything further. But that's it's kind of elaborate and a topic that I don't necessarily want to go into. What I want to say is 1 health is easily killed, and therefore it's bad. You want your minions to stay, and you want them to be sticky. That's a simple way to put it. And I also put at the bottom, 3 2s are better than 2 3s generally. So I'm talking about when a 2-cost minion has 3 attack and 2 health, that's better in a general sense than a 2 attack, 3 health creature. And the answer is, or the reason why that is even though health is usually better, once we're talking about 2-cost minions, it's important to note that you also want them to be able to contest higher cost minions, and that's how you develop value. If you trade in lower cost items for higher cost items of your opponent, higher cost minions of your opponent. So, say for some reason they have a 1/6 town on the board. Let's say it's a Mogushin Warden that's been hero powered once, and so that's a 4 mana card, and you're able to hit it twice with your 3/2. That's considerable value because you spent 2 mana to kill their 4 mana card. And that's, in general, that's a good choice, and it ends up being worth it. So you want to be able to more easily contest your opponent's larger minions, because Arena is also pretty important to have big stuff that stays on the board, that's able to trade, that's able to catch up on board state. Alright, so as I was saying before, your card must justify a card slot. You only have 30 cards in all of Hearthstone, and your lower cost cards need to be worth a slot in your 30 cards. So, I like the way that Trump said it once. Trump is a Hearthstone streamer, if you're familiar with him. He said the card has to do something on its own, or the card has to be worth it. It has to be worth it to play independently without needing other things to make it good. And that's pretty true. If you play a Wisp, which is 0 mana 1/1, it doesn't justify a card slot because it doesn't do anything. It doesn't. Sure, it costs 0 mana and maybe it can enable some combos if you're a rogue. It's not worth the card slot. That's just not the way it works. You can't force your 0-cost minion to do enough to the enemy or the enemy board to justify a spot in your 30 cards. And that's just the harsh truth of picking a Wisp. And here we'll talk about the 0-cost minions. So target dummy, 0/2 with taunt, 0 mana. There are some very, very rare instances in which the mech part of a target dummy can make it surprisingly good. And the example I can think of is the Iron Sensei, which is the rogue card. It's a 3 mana 2/2 that says at the end of your turn, give a friendly mech, I think it's +2/+2. And that can turn a turn 3 play into a 2/4 taunt, which is the buff target dummy, plus a 2/2. And that's pretty good. However, you don't want cards to be dependent on other cards for synergistic effects in Arena, because you can't reliably pull off synergistic effects enough of the time, generally speaking, to make it worth it. So, target dummy is pretty bad. It doesn't justify a spot. It has 0 attack, so it actually does nothing besides stop a minion from attacking once. And sometimes that will work out for you, but it won't work out for you enough to justify picking it. And the Wisp, as I talked about before, it's not strong enough. It can be hero powered easily, it can be hit by almost anything. It doesn't trade with any card higher than Magma Rager, and Magma Rager is a 3-cost card, and if you're picking Magma Rager, you're probably gonna beat your opponent, because Magma Rager is almost never the correct pick. So with that being said, these aren't the cards you want to pick. My mistake. Went back and forth a couple times that I didn't want to. Alright, so I made a list of the top tier 1-drops, because there aren't a lot of 1-drops that are actually worth a slot either. And the answer is, or the reason why is because they die. They die very easily, and you don't want your creatures to die very easily. So, we look at Zombie Chow. Zombie Chow is the god of Arena. I'll put it that way. And the reason why it's the god of the Arena is because Arena is all about board control. And once you have board control, you can start choosing how you want to methodically kill your opponent. And Zombie Chow allows for board control because if you take the ×2+1 rule, or the ×2+2 rule, we're asking for 3 or 4 worth of stats, and it has 5. And that's insane. The stats are ridiculously good on that card. And the restore 5 health to the enemy hero isn't really that big a deal because it's not about killing your opponent as fast as possible. It's about controlling the board state until you have complete control, and then you can hit the face. And sometimes in the case of when you're playing Priest, if you have an Auchenai Soul Priest, you can actually run in your Zombie Chow to an opponent's items or minions, and it will actually deal 5 damage to the enemy hero, so you get like a mini Mind Blast in there too, which is also pretty good. Workin' Infiltrator is the second best 1-drop in Arena because it is sticky in the sense that it is stealth. You get to choose when you attack with it, so this card trades pretty well with most other 2-drops, so you're getting value out of the card because it'll trade with 3 2s. And it'll also perhaps contribute to killing a larger minion in the future turns, because you get to choose when to reveal it. One mistake that people make with this card is once you play it on the board, you don't want to attack the face, generally speaking, because it's you want to keep it so that you can decide when you want to activate that kind of hidden potential or that hidden value. And the worst of these 3 is Argent Squire. The reason why Argent Squire is still in the top list is because it has Divine Shield, so it requires 2 hits to be taken out, meaning it's a little bit more sticky, and when I say sticky, I mean easier to stay on the board than other 1-cost minions. And it has one attack and 1 health, so it's not optimal, but there are some times in which you can get value out of the card. Oh my gosh, I keep skipping over things. Alright, so now let's talk about reevaluating the ×2+1 rule. I want to take a look at first the card all the way on the left. We have the River Crocolisk, which is the 2-mana 2/3. This card is average or below average. It doesn't really do a lot for what it is. But if you look at the Amani Berserker, same card, almost the same rarity. It's obviously a common versus the basic Crocolisk. In Arena, these two come out interchangeably, so you could see them both on the same pick, theoretically. Why would you ever pick the River Crocolisk over the Amani Berserker when the Amani Berserker has the bonus of having the potential Enrage ability? And there is one slight answer, and the answer is you have Beast Synergy and you're playing Hunter, which is very rare. Unlikely this will be the case. Amani Berserker will almost always be better. And Steamweedle Sniper, sorry. I'd pick this over River Crocolisk or Amani Berserker any day because it allows your Hunter, this is a Hunter class card, allows your Hunter hero ability to target minions, which allows your hero ability, which would normally just go straight to the face, impact the board significantly. It's like having a free Workin' Infiltrator hit at any time you want. Your hero power can target minions means that if you have 4 mana and you play this card, you all of a sudden have 4 mana, play a 2/3, and then deal 2 damage without losing a card. And that's really good because dealing 2 damage to any creature on the board is a lot in comparison to the Druid, which is deal 1 damage, the Rogue, which is deal 1 damage, or the Mage, which is deal 1 damage. And doubling is quite significant. So Steamweedle Sniper is actually a very good pick in Arena because it does more than just have ×2+1 in stats. It allows your hero to take control of the board. And the Amani Berserker, perhaps it can trade with a 2/2 or a 2/3 minion, and you finish it off with, let's say, hero ability or something. And all of a sudden you have a 5/1 Amani Berserker. And your opponent has to use their hero ability to get rid of it, or they play something like a Yeti or a like a spider tank or something that has three cost, and all of a sudden you just got so much value out of your Amani Berserker because you were able to use it twice in successful trades, and it was allowed to trade up and kill something worth more mana, that you got a tremendous amount of value with it, and you're now ahead on the board. So with that all being considered, it's important with 2-drops to do more than just have the ×2+1 rule. One of the top picks in Arena is the Acidic Swamp Ooze Battlecry. It's a 2-mana 3/2 Battlecry, destroy your opponent's weapon. And the reason why that card's really good is even though it has a variable effect, it has good stats, and in the case that you do pull it off, it's really, really powerful. It destroys maybe a rogue hero ability. If it destroys a fiery war axe from a warrior, the warrior might have just lost the game right there. It's really important to seize control of the board, and the stronger 2-drops you have, the stronger you can earlier seize control of that board. Here I have 2 cards with Battlecry / Death Rattle, and this is the Loot Hoarder versus Novice Engineer. Both these cards cost 2 mana. The Loot Hoarder is Death Rattle, draw a card, and the Battlecry for the Novice Engineer is Battlecry, draw a card. So, why is Loot Hoarder considered a top tier or a mid to high tier pick in Arena, and Novice Engineer is considered a below average pick in Arena? Excuse me. So, first, let's apply the ×2+2 rule. The Loot Hoarder. We determined in the last video that drawing a card is equivalent to around 1.5 mana. So the Loot Hoarder, we have 0.5 mana. Or that's the stats we're looking at. So we have 0.5 times 2 is 1, plus 2 is 3. The Loot Hoarder has those 3 stats. Good. Novice Engineer, Battlecry, draw a card, has 1 less stat point. Now you can argue that the Battlecry, draw a card, because it's a Battlecry, is better than the Death Rattle, draw a card. I do agree in the sense that Novice Engineer is better in the case that you're top decking. Top decking, obviously, when you run out of cards in your hand and you're just relying on whatever card first pops into your deck. Novice Engineer, in that case, is probably better than Loot Hoarder. But, in the terms of the first 2, 3, 4 turns of the game, Loot Hoarder actively contests the 3/2s from your opponent, and it contests any other creature that your opponents play. So much better than Novice Engineer, it's actually surprising how much that one attack makes a difference. For example, let's say I'm playing Mage, and your opponent plays a River Crocolisk, so a 2-mana 2/3, and I play my Loot Hoarder, and then he trades into my Loot Hoarder with his River Crocolisk. So he has a 2/1, and I have a card. Now, what I can do is I can hero ability that River Crocolisk down so that it's, it's dead now. And I now have a card of advantage that my opponent doesn't have. I have a card in my hand that my opponent does not have because the Loot Hoarder drew a card for me. Or you have the ideal Loot Hoarder scenario where you play your Loot Hoarder and then you trade it into a 3/2 and you destroyed a considerable more higher amount of stats. However, your card cost 2 mana, his card cost 2 mana, and you drew a card. You're up 1.5 mana and a card on your opponent. That's considerable. That's a big deal in Arena, where card advantage is very important, board control is very important, and all these things come into play when you're desperately searching for the right answers at the right times when your opponents pull out strange, maybe unexpected things, because Arena is a pretty strange and unexpected place. So, I forgot I had another slide actually. These are examples of more 2-drops that are top tier or considerably above average. Mad Bomber is unique in the sense that it's Battlecry, draw and play an arcane missiles that can possibly hit your own allied things. And sometimes this card can be bad, but if you play this card on turn 2 and it kills a Worgen Infiltrator, it kills any sort of 1-drop that has 1 health, it kills hell, maybe a Knife Juggler. It has 2 hits on the Knife Juggler. You gain so much in terms of tempo, and you gain so much in terms of confidence, like your opponent gets really upset when that happens, obviously, that you can run away with the game from that point. Obviously, it's not that pronounced all the time, but considering Mad Bomber is a fantastic card in Arena, and based on statistics from other sources, Mad Bomber is overrepresented in a 12-win deck. So more often than not, people who actually got to 12 wins did so and had a Mad Bomber in their deck. So from a statistical standpoint, it makes it seem like Mad Bomber is an above average card. Knife Juggler, it's a 2-mana 3/2, like a Bloodfin Raptor, except after you summon a minion, deal 1 damage to a random enemy. Knife Juggler is really strong because you can play your Haunted Creeper or you can play your other low-cost minion, and you all of a sudden have an extra 1 damage to work with. And it's random, so you can't guarantee where it's going to hit. But sometimes you have no losing scenario. Sometimes there's an ideal scenario where I really wish it would hit this minion. But if it doesn't, everything is still okay. I hope it pops this Divine Shield. I hope this is whatever. Knife Juggler is an insanely good card because it gives you the opportunity to play a card and on that turn have that card do something even if it's not ready to attack. And that's really good. And Haunted Creeper, even though it is bad in stats and it defies the 1 attack is bad and the 1 health is bad, and spiders also have 1 attack and 1 health, this card is resistant to board clear, which is good because board clear is king in Arena. So I'm talking about Consecration, Flame Strike, those kind of cards that can wipe away your opponent's board and catch up on cards. Haunted Creeper still leaves something in return, which is stronger because it allows you to maintain some kind of board presence even after your opponent plays their catch-up mechanism or their catch-up card in the form of a board clear. So I think that's everything. That is everything. So in this video we talked about what we think are optimal 2-cost cards. We talked about optimal 1-cost cards. We talked about how there are no optimal 0-cost cards. And we talked about why you need to justify the card slot, or you need to justify that the card is worth a card slot in your deck. Now you always want early game cards, but you always want your early game cards to be good because tempo is really important, and being able to play your minions and have them outperform their opponent is very important in Arena. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I will be making episode 3 shortly. I don't know when they're going to be released though, because we have a Metamis Gaming has a schedule, so I'll try my best. If you'd like to argue with me, debate with me, add something more to the comments, please do so below. Really appreciate it. I will read all of them. I'll try to respond if any are worth responding to, I guess. And I really hope you enjoyed this video. I do enjoy making these. It's fun to talk about Hearthstone game theory. And I hope you learned something. That's the most important part. If you didn't learn anything, let me know. I will try my best to explain it in a more clear context. So that's everything for this video. Thank you so much. I'll see you guys next time. Out.